Welcome to Goal 5, our Initiative 5, Increasing Equitable Access to Nature. We're super excited to have our last quarterly meeting of the year. Radhika and I are really pumped to welcome our guests this session for our last community spotlight. And afterwards, we'll be talking kind of as a group about our initiative, what we see as our path going forward. We'll talk a bit about what's going on with the GVI roadmap, which I also help co-chair with Raquel Garcia Alvarez, and talking a bit about the integration of those initiatives with ours, since there's so much overlap. And we'll be getting feedback and input from everyone here about how we want to carry these different pieces forward. Go to the next slide, Laura. But first, we're going to have our community spotlight with our friends from Surratt Nature Center in Southwest Michigan. So we have Nate Fuller with us, who's the executive director. Is Carolyn on as well? Or is she?
Carolyn came down with the stomach bug this morning.
Oh, okay. Well, we wish Carolyn well. We've got Juliet Golub, who's a senior naturalist and education coordinator with Surratt, and then James Gunter, who's the founder of Present Pillars, which is an incredible organization that is also a partner of Surratt, to talk a bit about the work that they've done to increase their local communities' access to an incredible natural area, and how the power of partnerships in making these kinds of really great programs possible. So with that, Nate and Juliet and James, I turn it over to you.
Okay, so can I still control slides from here, or do we need to stop sharing? So
yeah, how about you guys share it on your end?
Yeah, there we go. Oh, sorry, things are. There we go. So thank you very much for having us. Excited to have Surratt enter the world of Chicago wilderness. We've been peeking around the lake there for quite a while at you guys. So just to give you a sense of where Surratt Nature Center is, we are just across the lake from you guys there in the Benton Harbor, which is, could draw almost a straight line across to Evanston, or I would maybe say Glenview. That's where I grew up over there, where the big wild area was the 5 acres owned by the church that I grew up visiting. But once I came over to Michigan, I decided I have to go visit my folks over on the other side of the lake, and you guys should come visit us too. We're only about 2 hours away from downtown Chicago, depending on traffic. That commute, if you get bad traffic, it takes longer to get to Glenview from downtown Chicago than it does to get over to Surratt. So encourage folks to come on over and see what we have going on over here in the Benton Harbor area. Surratt Nature Center was first founded in 1965. It was a gift of land from Elizabeth Vaughter, who was from the family that founded Whirlpool, and she thought her community should have a nature center. And so she got that started. It's opened as a nature center, and it was named after Mrs. Vaughter's longtime friend and inspiration for nature, Lou Surratt, who grew up in the Benton Harbor area and is best known for his work as a poet and nature lover, but also professionally was recognized as a professor at U of I and Northwestern. And there's all sorts of interesting stories about him and his passion for the out of doors. And we can save that for another time. But the key thing is it all started back close to 60 years ago. And then shortly after the Nature Center opened, its first full-time director, Chuck Nelson, got going, and he started building trails and bringing out kids. And that's a legacy still on today. We have 5 to 8 miles of trail, depending on what time of year it is. Right about now, as we're clearing out all of our cross-country ski and snowshoeing trails, we are right around that 8-mile mark out here. But we have close to a mile of boardwalk through the wetlands out there, and our wetlands are spectacular. We are along the floodplain of the Paw Paw River, and we have it's been recognized as a center of biodiversity in Michigan. as I've been part of a number of different conservation planning efforts, but the Pawpaw River has one of the most intact floodplain forests in the lower peninsula of Michigan. Hundreds of thousands of acres of a wide floodplain. And you can sort of see in the center of the picture there our canopy walkway, our treetop walkway, where it takes you from the break of the bank of the floodplain out over the floodplain, so you can do your warbler watching with them all around you right there. We have all different types of wetlands along the way, from swamp forest to prairie fen to your regular old cattail marsh, stretched all along the river. We now are up to over 900 acres along the Pawpaw River. And at that point, the Pawpaw is about 3.5 miles from the shore of Lake Michigan. And with that sort of north-south geographic structure, we are a fantastic flyway, great destination for migratory birds, bats, and butterflies, all in there. Impressive variety of biodiversity. In the past, the Nature Center's focus was really on education and happened to enjoy biodiversity. We're doing our best to now do more documentation of the biodiversity out there, and finding that we are a pretty important resource for the area in terms of butterflies. We have one of the largest eastern box turtle populations in Michigan, and botanically important. We're a stronghold for prothonotary warblers nesting through our swamplands. Of course, we have the common wildlife as well, but a real popular destination for wildlife lovers, and increasingly trying to boost more and more research going on our property as well. Word's getting out, we're getting a lot more work on the land in that way. But what we're really known for is our Mitchell satyr population, federally threatened butterfly. We think there's about 15 populations left on the planet, and we're one of the largest ones left. We're one of the sources for a captive rearing program, where we're working with a lot of partners, Fish and Wildlife Service and state and local partners, trying to stave off extinction from an incredibly rare butterfly that is tied to prairie fens. They need the spring-fed wetlands for winter survival. And then with the butterflies in the springs come one of our favorite snakes of the area, the eastern Massasauga. They don't have the same well wishes that many butterflies do, but we're just getting started and trying to get an assessment of our population. We are finding all age classes out there, and excited that we might be a really valuable resource for Massasauga recovery as well, and have the intent to help with their public relations challenge along the way. That said, about the biodiversity and breadth of land and everything we have at Surratt, if you ask people in the area what they know Surratt for, they're going to talk to you about the education programming we have. And what started with good old Chuck Nelson back in the 70s, he built a program where we are seeing 25,000 students a year coming through on an annual basis with a staff of roughly 10. We are teaching everything from exploring the wetlands to tapping maple trees to getting outside, exploring in our giant Voyager canoes built by Ralph Fries. If those folks in the area remember Ralph, advocate for paddling in the Chicago wilderness area. Again, mentioned we're getting ready for cross-country ski season, hoping that lake effect snow gives us another good year there too. And so for decades, Surratt has been doing tons of elementary school programming and some family programming on the weekends, and occasionally we do natural history tours, trips around the world. But about 2 years ago or so, we had, as I came on as director about 3.5 years ago, we decided we needed to do some strategic planning. The Nature Center had grown quite a bit in capacity, and our mission was stated as providing quality environmental education for the community. And so I wanted to hear from all of my board and staff and our regular volunteers and everybody. What does that mean? what is quality environmental education and who is our community? Surratt started as very much just a local nature center serving the immediate towns and areas. And when you talk to longtime members and stuff, they think about our community in terms of elementary schools, like what school districts are coming here. But nowadays, with the internet, Surratt isn't a secret anymore, and we're getting folks from around the world coming and visiting us, and we're right along the interchange of major highways. You can see on the way to Grand Rapids, Detroit, Kalamazoo, and people heading up north to Saugatuck or Traverse City are all going by us, and word's out, we're a cool place to visit. So our sense of community has changed dramatically. So we want to say who, our capacity to serve our communities increased with the support. So who are the communities we have not traditionally focused on? Who can we help more? And that's part of that coming out of that retreat was, okay, what are there some audiences we can just specifically do as simple as reach out and offer more programming to them. So some of that came with the idea of the silver foxes for the senior community, and how do we welcome that group out there. And one of it was looking at our trails, and we had wheelchair accessible trails in the form of boardwalks through the woods that were conceived with best intent, but in practicality were liabilities. They stayed wet, they got slimy, there was no curbs on them, and they were actually, our wetlands down to the boardwalk dried out better than the ones in the woods. And so these ones were slick and dicey. So bad news for wheelchairs, just bad news for people, a lot of falls going on there. So this spring we tore out that boardwalk and replaced it with compacted crushed limestone, and it's a much safer, more welcoming trail. But then we also started offering programming at least once a month, specifically for seniors who wanted continuing education on natural history. So this was a group who was out learning fall or early winter tree identification. We've had programs on coniferous plants. We've had programs on biogeography. We've had programs on turtles, butterflies, spring wildflowers, kind of whatever seasonally appropriate, maple sugaring, winter animal survival, tracks. We just try to keep it interesting and a good variety. And it's proved to be immediately one of our most popular programs. Now attendance, like on bad weather days, and sometimes might drop as low as 6 or 7, but like our fall winter tree ID, we had 25 people out. A lot of it too is building a sense of community. We're getting the regulars coming back repeatedly and building friendships amongst the Silver Fox crowd, who then look forward to seeing each other as much as they do of whatever topic we might be presenting at that time. And at this point, I'll pause and stop sharing. So it's maybe a fine time so to pass the reins over to Juliet to talk about the Women in Nature program, which was another focus group we decided we needed to focus on.
Yeah, definitely it's kind of an interesting start to see where we needed to go, and what were we missing. And we really wanted there to be a group where women could go out in nature, and as Nate's stressed previously, and something that we've been working on a lot is that sense of community and being able to feel safe and have access to nature and be able to gain new experiences and new skills. So in fall of 2020, we had planned to do a women's weekend is where this all started, a kayak trip up north. And obviously with COVID that got canceled, but that was originally, I think actually an idea from Nate and his wife Erin, and it kind of turned into, well, why aren't we doing these programs regularly anyway? And so that's where WIN came from, the Women in Nature group. And so we figured if we started to do programs throughout the year, when things opened up and we could do a larger scale traveling program up north again, hopefully by then we had this group of ladies who was excited to go outside and to go enjoy these activities together. So we started, our first program was in January of 2021, and we did an outdoor skills class. And we didn't know if we were going to get anybody for it, but it ended up being huge. It was really, really great success. We actually had to do 2 sessions of the class that day, and we had 50 plus people, somewhere between 50 and 60 women sign up to come take this class. And we did orienteering, and I gave them a very simplified map, and I taught them how to use their compasses, and they got us out to our camping spot for the day, where we got to teach them how to make fires. What are some of the easiest ways to make a campfire? And then once they all had their fires made, we taught them how to cook an easy meal on their fires as well. And so it was a really, really exciting class. And as we were sitting around eating our lunches, we were asking them, is this something you guys would like to do? Would you like to see more of these women groups? Would you like to see more programs? And everybody was very, very excited. So we started jotting down a list, and we were asking them all, what programs would they like to see? And so we had this whole list of topics that we could go from. And we started doing programs about every other month, based on the topics that people had asked for. And although we did have quite a bit of attendance, we did notice some issues, and even 2 years down the road, this is still definitely a work in progress to figure out what best meets the needs of this community. So the second class that we did was a woody plants and their medicinal uses. So talking about the natural history of the plants in the area. And with this class, we realized very quickly that what people were looking for was engagement, not just education. They didn't want us to sit there and lecture at them. They didn't want to just go for a hike. They wanted to be participating, and they wanted to be active. And as the year went on, we realized that was a theme throughout. So that's something that we've kind of struggled with and worked back and forth on, was making sure that the programs were programs that individuals wanted to participate in. If we were to do a hike at one of our other properties, or even somewhere else in the county, numbers were very low for attendance. But beginning kayaking, beginning birding, organic art classes, the ski classes, those programs where we were engaging and teaching them new skills and experiences were the ones that were very, very popular and have continued to be so. So we switched it to a monthly program because we did want to, there were so many topics and so many requests that we wanted to, one, be able to cover those. And two, if we wanted this sense of community, we wanted it to have this be a repeating thing that, people didn't forget about. We wanted it to stay consistent. But what we noticed was in probably about March of this year, March of 2022, as things started to open up again after COVID. Obviously, we're still living in the COVID world, but as things have opened up again, our attendance numbers went down again as well, because there were more options than just going to a nature center and going outside. There was other options of activities for people to do again. So that's something we're kind of struggling with. And we're trying to figure it out. So, in the future, we're really trying to figure out that target audience. We know that the group that we're looking for, that we kind of are missing a little bit more at Surratt, is, the women aged 20 to 50 is kind of that age range that we're going for. And we want it to be a social event. We want people to feel comfortable. We want it to be a place where people can gather and just have a good time. We don't want it to feel like it's an educational program. But since that's what we're known for, that's how it comes across. So, that's one of the things we've struggled with, is figuring out how to market it to women, to come across in this way that, no, we're getting together, we're having a good time, we're not just going to be talking at you the whole time. Is something we're still trying to figure out. And we know that there have been other nature centers that have marketed their programs solely as, a social hike. They've put that word in there specifically to help, and that's something we're thinking about. Other places to market the events we're still working on, because at the moment it's getting sent out to our members in our newsletter, and it's getting posted to our Facebook, which is the biggest way that people see our events. But do we need to make our own group for it? We don't quite know. So those are struggles and challenges that we're trying to figure out for the future, because we want this to continue. We want it to grow. We want to have more repeat members in this community, especially leading up to this August, when we're finally going to have that trip again. So we have it on the calendar for a long weekend. We're going up to the Gaylord area to do kayaking and hiking, and we're staying at the DNR's Ram Center, so that it's not too expensive of a trip, something that's hopefully accessible for people to get a new experience out in nature. But it's interesting trying to reach that audience, but it's been very rewarding as well for the women who have participated. It's always super friendly, it's always super interactive and exciting, and everybody has such a wonderful time that we want to spread it. We want to get it to more people. So we've really enjoyed bringing these WIN events to the Nature Center. It's just figuring out how to continue them in the best way. But obviously there are far more communities than just WIN. That's the short of it for us. But aside from the Silver Foxes program and the WIN events, there's other communities that we're working with as well. And so that's where I'd like to introduce James Gunter, who is founder of the Present Pillars, who we've started to work with recently as well. So I can keep going on the slides if you'd like, James. You can just tell me when to go forward. Is James still here?
Oh, James, you're muted.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. So thank you for the introduction, Juliet.
Yes.
So as she said, my name is James Gunter. I am a co-founder of Present Pillars. We are a fatherhood initiative out of Berrien County, Michigan. And our kind of mantra, as you see on the screen here, is a healthy father, healthy family, and then healthy community. So with that mantra, we start at the beginning of that equation, which is healthy father. Typically, what we've noticed in our society is that our fathers are either ill-equipped or not present, right? And that happens a lot and more than often. So in my work at the Boys and Girls Club, this is where I kind of noticed that it was an issue. And so we built Present Pillars. So John Sams and I, the co-founders, we were sitting on his couch one day just talking about our own struggles with fatherhood. And we decided that, hey, well, maybe we should have a podcast and talk about these things because maybe they're normal, right? So then from there, we had the podcast and it was successful. And we said, well, maybe we need to take it further. And so we created a nonprofit organization. And you go ahead to the next one. So we support families by encouraging responsible fatherhood. That could look like simple bonding activities. Our flagship program, which is Pillars University, which supports fathers of all experience levels. We have programs for prospective fathers, new fathers, expecting fathers, experienced fathers, fathers that have been in the criminal justice system, and dads that just want, they don't have to have anything wrong. Like they could just want to have more bonding experiences and things like that. We also make space for them. We advocate for fathers and their families through Friend of the Court, through a lot of different things, shelters or school, any problem that is presented, we try to help them work through it. Also, we work a lot with schools and Boys and Girls Club to kind of give those kids that don't have dad or a father figure present that sense of a positive male figure in their life. And then ultimately, we want to create a community around fathers that, for instance, one of my personal stories, when my daughter was born, that postpartum period is when most families split. So what I needed was someone to share how I was feeling, because I felt like I was a fish out of water. Like, is this only happening to me? How did I go from being the center of this woman's universe to like being an afterthought? So I needed a community to tell me that, hey, this is normal, and you have to find a way to stay with your family and stay in your family and get involved. So that's kind of what we mean by creating that community around fatherhood. So for the next slide. So to the point, which is our partnership with Surrett, I had my first introduction as an adult to Wilder Places when a good friend of mine, Al Musman, he started something called Zoe Adventures. And I got the opportunity to go on a trip to Oregon on a 4 or 5 day rafting trip on the Rogue River. And this was the group that I got to go with. It's a organization called GOES, Get Out and I can't remember what GOES stands for now, but it was a really cool trip. But I really got to see that the phrase "Black people don't do stuff like this" is probably the worst ceiling I've ever seen in my life, right? So I'm on this rock, and it's like a cliff where we're jumping into the river. Everyone else did it but me, right? So, and it's like not even that far off the river. It's maybe 10 feet, and I'm terrified. And I ended up not doing it. And it was in that moment that I'm like, okay, well, everyone else just did this rock like 2 or 3 times. Like, what is so scary about it? And pretty much the conclusion that I came up with was, all my life, I've been told Black people don't do stuff like this. So now I'm on this mission. Like, we have to get kids outside, adults outside. Everybody has to experience these things, because that ceiling that we've ascribed ourselves doesn't make sense. It's irrational. The fear is irrational. Everything about that statement is irrational. So then to the next slide, we came up with a program, and Nate and Dane were gracious enough to accommodate all of our craziness. And we came up with this program, the Father and Kids Campout, which we were able to do on Surrett property. And to me, it really birthed what I can't wait to see next year, which is even more outdoors activities, camping, fishing, hiking, anything we can do to get people outside. And I think the partnership with Surrett is pivotal in our endeavors to just get fathers back ingratiated into their families, but ultimately getting our youth outside. So also, I work for the Boys and Girls Club, and right now we're working on a program with Surrett as well to use some of our space around our property just to do the same thing, make it easier for our youth to be in outside spaces. And one of my favorite sayings, which is the motto for Zoe, is "We belong in wilder places." Right? So, and getting our kids to understand that you don't only have to conform to what people think you should be doing, right? You can look at something and think it's cool, and it is cool because you think it's cool. So let's do it. There's nothing stopping us. Like we want to go on more GOES trips. We want to go to Surrett. We want to think going to Surrett is normal, right? I'm going on a hike in Surrett on Saturday. Like, more people should be saying stuff like that. Like, we belong in wilder places. So everything we can do to emphasize that and really just facilitate it is what we plan to do going forward. And then on our next slide. So in the future, as I was just alluding to, let's get this out of the way here. We look to do more camping, fishing, hiking events through our partnership with Surrett, help building bridges to partners and families. So that means that when Surrett is having an event, we want to publicize that event to our audience, just to make sure more people are becoming aware of what's out there. And then Boys and Girls Club, Surrett already has a really strong partnership with schools, so we don't have to go there, but even other nonprofits, just any way we can getting the message out that, hey, this is here, it's right in our backyard, and we should be taking advantage. And then engaging the population that migrates to the area during the summer months. We know that a lot of families love family-oriented events because you can go to those things that are just for adults, right? But if you bring your kids, then you want to have something for them to do too. So we want to always be promoting those things that are for families too, because we know we get a large population that bring their kids along with them when they do visit Southwest Michigan. Then we want to incorporate STEM and environmental conservation education, because with going outside means that more people are coming out, which means there could be more trash, more invasive activity, if you will. And we want to teach people how to care for outside so that outside can continue to care for us. And then long-term structural and programmatic improvements in inner city Ben Harbor. So I'm working on a project right now to turn a small part of city-owned property into our own small little nature area where we can continue to push this type of programming and people have access to it in their own neighborhood, right? Not necessarily where they have to travel to go camping or fishing or hiking. We have the Ox Creek watershed, which gives access to any city resident to do the same thing. So we have this idea for now that connects Boys and Girls Club to that piece of property, which also connects to a city park. And I believe that that could be the start of it being normal in Benton Harbor. Being outside can be normal in Benton Harbor. Then I think I have one more.
Yep.
Yep. So if anyone had any questions or anything like that, please let me know. I thought I had a slide here with my contact information, but I can put that in the chat if there's not.
I don't see one, so putting it in the chat would be great.
Awesome. Well, round of applause. I mean, virtual applause, you guys. That's so incredible. Really incredible work on these partnerships and programs. And we've got plenty of time too, if folks have any questions for Nate or Juliet or James about anything that they presented on. Feel free to drop things in the chat or come off mute or raise a virtual hand. I saw that Mario put in the chat just a reference to using the phrase entry level on different outdoor events to help folks feel like they don't have to have a certain set of skills to join in. And I think that's definitely a good suggestion. Somebody asked in the chat, how is Surrett funded? Nate, I don't know if you want to take that.
Sure. Surrett is a nonprofit 501c3 where the majority of our funding comes from memberships and annual donations. And so we have an endowment that helps us, but yeah, most of it is annual fundraising from the generosity of others. We don't have any state or federal grants we get are going towards this point pretty much habitat management. There's no sustaining funds coming from any state or federal partners.
Awesome. Mario, go for it.
Do you have any relationship to either the Pokagon Band of the Potawatomi, who I think are close by you there, or Gun Lake?
So yeah, the Potawatomi Band are we're trying to build that relationship that traditionally didn't have much of one. We started reaching out to them right before COVID, of course, just that, but since then have come back and actually now I'm hopefully by next year I'll have exciting results of we're working with the band to reintroduce wild rice to Surrett's property so that they have a local forage place, because they're struggling right now where a lot of their resources is on federal land and they're struggling to get permission to forage on the federal land. And so we're much closer and won't have nearly as much paperwork. So yeah, that's my goal there, is to open up to have a more direct relationship with the local tribes.
Cool.
That's incredible. I think could be a really cool thing to think about too across the Chicagoland region between landowning partners and Indigenous groups. How can we rematriate aspects of land or find ways to return certain Indigenous practices to spaces? That's super cool.
Yeah, that's just one of the challenges they had, was just getting permission for the members of the tribe to go collect sustainably as they had historically, and just getting that simple permission of yes, is apparently really hard to get in some places. So one of the benefits of being a private nonprofit is it's a whole lot easier to say yes when people ask you for things.
Well, and I don't know, are you doing any, will you do any monitoring of, say, the ecological impact on biodiversity that both the reintroduction and the harvesting has, so that maybe then you serve as a reassuring pilot program for folks like the NPS who want to say things like, yes, you can plant something here, but we're a national park, so no, you can't come and harvest it afterward. Is there a way it could feed into getting people to rethink what land management looks like?
I would love that. We're hey, does the Field Museum want to come do some research projects? I'll say yes. I don't have funding to do all the things, but that's why I try to find the partners who have. So I'm trying to get the reputation out there as a nature center that says yes a lot. Because historically the nature center wasn't always. They were a little leery of research and what people were going to do on their land and stuff, but more and more. So we're working, say now, most recently we have everyone from U of I, Champaign-Urbana doing bird expansion research, yellow-breasted chats and blue grosbeak's range expansion. We're doing bumblebee pollinator research with some Purdue students. We've got MSU and U of M students looking at other pollinator work, as well as our Mitchell Sater and Massasauga projects as well. So lots of opportunities with the wild rice. At this point, it's very informal and low key, and basically I'm saying, yep, here's our land. You do what you want. Kind of just keep us in the loop, and we're not going to put restrictions on you. And in their mind, they're like, it should be nice if we just come out and throw the rice where we think it should go and track to see if it comes back. I said, if that's what you want, go for it. If we can find people to come do research, all the better. So I would just say, with the perspective I've had of being relatively new as director, though, we had our strategic retreat about how we're going to try and reach out and get more engagement, offer more engagement to different populations. And it was a bit intimidating, everything I thought we should do and how we were going to accomplish it. And how do I have time to go reach out and engage everyone? But it turned out that a lot of it was more of a mindset of welcoming opportunities to work with other groups. And so things, emails or conversations that might have just gotten overlooked in the past, now just ring the bell and say, no, this is the opportunity. And remember, you said you wanted to make these opportunities happen. So, I mean, that's how James and I crossed paths, right? We both happened to be applying for the same grant at the same time. And James called me and asked me if I'd be willing to be a partner on this grant idea he had. And I was like, oh, I just submitted my grant ask for that. But let's talk more. And then we talked with the funder and we said, you know what, it fits everyone's mission better if we do this as a team, and I can always find funding elsewhere for the other idea I had. And that's just where, like, I think in the past, if I had just been focused on, like, I need to get grant money for my organization and prioritize myself, I might have brushed James off. But instead, I'm so excited. James, you can see he's a great guy. You don't brush him off. And I'm excited about the friendship we're building here. And you get us talking together, just all the potential of what we can do is pretty exciting. And a lot of it just starts by being willing to say yes.
And yeah, I'm happy to at least make a couple of inquiries about, say, wild rice monitoring protocols or things like that through some connections I have, and I can get back to you with sort of like what it might look like or who might have interest. No guarantees of any sort, but it's actually something we could look into.
Awesome. Hey, the power of the alliance, man. Making connections and sharing resources. I love it. And I think I just want to really lift up what you said, Nate, about recognizing where it's time to step back and be open to those partnerships and that opportunity for collaboration. I think a lot of us have seen in the last couple of years how much more powerful collaboration is, especially even in just terms of like growing organizations than being competitive with other organizations. And that's absolutely what we're here to do, I think, as organizations, trying to collaborate around how we create accessible spaces in the outdoors, because we know it's not through competing for funds. That definitely has not been working for us. And I think you're speaking to that mindset is really powerful. I've been in a lot of conversations over the last few years with folks who want to know how we make partnerships and have a lot of questions about that process, but it really is as simple as just being open to them and being willing to make relationships with people and make friends before you make a program. And once you have that trust established, the rest comes really naturally. So very cool. Radhika, go for it.
Totally agree, Danny. Thank you. James, I had a question, if you wouldn't mind describing how your work with the Nature Center has impacted the mission of Present Pillars. Like how is it advanced your organization's mission?
That's a great question. I would say our partnership with Surrett has really sparked the interest of most guys. Honestly, a lot of guys love being outdoors. They want to take their kids, especially their sons, outdoors with them. And moms actually were the driving force behind the success of the event. So initially, we switched the date because we thought it would rain. And it rained for 15 minutes, and I was so upset because it would have been a great day for camping. But we ended up switching it to another day where participation went down. But what I noticed as we started to promote the event was that this was the most traction we've ever gotten from the community. I believe initially we had about 20 signups on that first date. So I would say moving into next year, we did a couple surveys about what people actually wanted for next summer's events, and a lot of them were outdoors events. So I think the introduction of that Father Kids Camp Out, it really drove our engagement, because that's why we do those social cohesion events, so that we could end up offering things that were changing lives in terms of like how a father fit back into his family, or how he could in turn play an integral part in the development of his kids. Great question.
Thank you.
Any other questions or ideas or things? Nate. Yeah.
I just wanted to share a thank you to Chicago Wilderness for welcoming us to come share this, but also the contribution you made to us is significant to us. And it's not tons of money, but it's the kind of money we don't just have available to us. And so, say James and I are talking about ways we can use some of that support directly into next summer's gear, of how do we get more gear for their outdoor experiences. And so just wanted to let you know, thank you very much, and that the funding is going right into the kind of programs we're talking about. So thank you.
Thanks, Nate. That's so wonderful to hear. And I have to say too, it's kind of funny taking over as co-chair for this group. I just learned at our last quarterly meeting that we are offering stipends for community spotlights to all of the folks who presented for the last year. So if you didn't know that, that was something that Amy was able to finagle through the field. So everybody who you've seen present to us over the last year talking about the amazing community work they're doing to connect people to our natural environment have been given a stipend to help support that work. So Sometimes increasing engagement is as simple as helping people get some gear. I think we can all speak to that from experience in our own programs. And having these conversations is definitely a fun part of it too. But if there's nothing else, I just want to thank Nate, Juliet, and James again. Oh, James, go for it.
Also want to add too, the timing on that DEI switch for Surrett was perfect for us, because had Nate not been so receptive, I don't know where we would have got that component of our programming. And so I know it was all like, because I didn't know how the conversation would go when I initially reached out to him, but from the beginning, like, he was super open to everything. So I just want to highlight what you said and what he said earlier about those partnerships, and how the trickle effect of a good partnership is you can't put a price on it. So I would encourage everyone to, like you said, be open, and yeah, great things can happen that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And they build out too, right? Your partners have partners. And when you've established yourself as somebody who says yes, like Nate said, and you're a trusted person who's willing to commit the time and the energy and actually cares, like, your partners will come in too. And you build out these really strong, awesome communities around these programs. So absolutely. I like the word ripple effect there. It's definitely a ripple effect and fun nature reference. So it's a double win. But I just want to thank you all again for presenting. This was really phenomenal, and it kind of made my Friday to hear about these really sweet things happening in a part of our Chicago Wilderness region that we don't hear from a lot. So this is really, really cool. And I hope you guys keep coming back and participating with us. We can learn a lot, I think, from the work you're doing, and we're happy to share the resources we have within the Alliance too to help further and support that work. So amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. You guys are welcome to hang out too for our next discussion, but also you're welcome to hop off if you don't want to. But we're going to talk a little bit about Goal 5 or Initiative 5, and kind of, how we shape this kind of work around our region and continue to further and foster it. So I'm going to share my screen. And this is meant to be an incredibly participatory event. So everybody on the call, please feel free to interrupt me, chime in, mention, talk in the chat. Radhika and I will be keeping an eye on things too, to make sure we're getting everybody's thoughts. But I kind of just want to start with a very simple, hold on, sorry. I have a new computer and I have to give it permission to share my screen. Okay, actually, Laura, could you share the screen, the presentation for me? I now have to restart Zoom if I want this to work, so didn't think about that. But basically, it's been about a year or so since we kind of talked about, when we first started these meetings, when I first started getting involved with Chicago Wilderness, really was joining this group and really refining the goals of this initiative and talking about the sub goals and the strategies. We had a lot of sessions about the language and kind of honing in on it. And I know for a lot of us, there were some questions and feelings around it. And so I have a question. Sorry, Laura, I had reorganized the slides a little bit, but from the Google Doc, but the question I wanted to kind of start with was, how do people feel that we as an alliance increase equitable access, not just as an organization with an alliance, but with our strategy, with our network as a collective of organizations? What's our role in that really big kind of goal that we're undertaking in this group? What does that mean in terms of an alliance advancing equitable access to nature? And I'm open to people's thoughts, or kind of just your initial gut reaction to what that really means to you. What does equitable access look like in the Chicago Wilderness region, thinking about the diversity of partners, of spaces, of communities? And to me, it's really diffuse. I mean, it's a very broad goal, right? We're talking about multiple states, multiple cities, multiple organizations. And I think, to me, at least, it's about how can we be a hub of resources, of networks and connections that help people when they are working in this arena as their own organization, and how can we foster those connections into spaces and to each other to help build out these relationships like Nate and James are talking about. How can we create kind of these bridges? I think that's, to me, what I see, but yeah, Laura, go for it.
Yeah, Danny, I definitely agree with that. I also think to the extent that we can serve as an advocacy platform for working with the public agencies in particular, whether it's for the 30 by 30 initiative or to identify what is the gap in access to safe and welcoming nature spaces, whatever we can do to help even develop the map and the definition of what that would be to have those spaces would fit into that.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense.
I would add to that advocacy piece, throughout all these conversations, I'm really struck by how much funding is a barrier, and how much we all want to really spend a lot of our time and our staff time putting in the time and the effort required to do this work, but we are so limited by funding. And so I would like to see us advocate with the funders that be in terms of what our priorities are for this work and what our needs are in order to advance it in a real meaningful way. And I think we can do that as a coalition a lot stronger than we can as individual organizations. And that somebody mentioned before that there's competition for this funding, and so if we can show that we are working together, we don't need to compete, and we don't need to live in this scarcity mindset, and that we can really flourish together as a community. So I think that kind of advocacy is really on top of my mind right now.
Absolutely. Love the mention of scarcity mindset. We are all people, I think, that can recognize the abundance that exists in our world. And so we should be operating from that headspace. Absolutely. Bill, I saw you raising your hand.
Yeah, I guess that, number one really is two parts. One, making sure that the spaces are welcoming, and we've heard some good stories there on Surrett, but it's also making it easy for people to get there. Even just looking, just driving back up Lakeshore Drive and seeing how hard it is, even though there are now pedestrian bridges across the drive and other tracks, it's still, if you want to walk from the south side over to the lakefront, it's quite a hike, right? So, and we're working with groups of friends in Big Marsh, and it's a really nice, welcoming place, bicycles available and all those good things, but it's really not very welcoming to walk there or even bike there, and transportation is limited. So when you talk about advocacy, it's, advocacy maybe for funding to help these areas, but also, does it make sense to have outings that are, if we can't have a bus route there, is there a way to fund, say, one week every month, there's a trip from a neighborhood over or something, so maybe thinking more outside the box on how to make it easy for people to get to these places, people who don't have access to cars easily.
Absolutely. Transportation is definitely one of the number one issues. I think in some studies, it's the number one thing that keeps people from accessing green space. And definitely in Chicago, where we have a very interesting stratification of what neighborhoods do and don't have access to public transit and where that public transit reaches. Absolutely. I think too, there's a lot of really cool programs within our alliance too that are doing work around these different things that are being brought up, and I think it'll be exciting. I'll talk a little bit about the audit that we're launching, trying to get a sense from folks of the different programs and efforts that are happening in the initiative, or within the alliance, and within our initiatives. But seeing how we can kind of share these resources and leverage them together and collaborate on them will be really helpful too.
Danny,
Yeah.
one idea I've floated with Terry, and I would love to know what people think about this idea, is the idea of talking to the folks who are working on the opioid settlement funds, to have them think broadly about ways that time in nature or ways to engage in nature can be part of the healing process or the rehab process, or, it's like the safety net once people get out of rehab, that they can have tools to use in nature or something like that. I thought that, if we have a large coalition advocating on behalf of the use of those kind of funds, it's millions of dollars. It's the Department of Human Services. So I don't know those folks at all, but just another idea that we could potentially sign a letter on or something like that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think public health collaborations are a really natural extension of environmental work when we think about all of the things that go into people's wellness and how much the natural world builds up into that, and access to those spaces, right? And what that, you can look at all of the correlations between having access to green space and different health outcomes, and especially having access to healthy quality green space, right? Thinking about our friends in environmental justice communities who, of course, have a bunch of adverse health outcomes from exposure to toxins. And I think too, this is also where I see the power of an alliance, right? We have a lot of really strong folks in our network, and through, again, like Radhika said, a collective of voices, we can have a huge influence on groups by coming together and making statements and putting out suggestions based on these findings and things that we look at together. Absolutely. Laura, you can pull the slides back up. With all of this in mind, I think this is all really helpful framing. I want us to kind of revisit the language of our goals and our strategies, not to go back into like our fine tuning of all the words that we did last year, but really to think about the intention behind these goals, and if they are what we want to carry forward into 2023. How do we activate around these goals? What does it look like for us to be working towards this? And I think that's, personally, as somebody who's been part of this work for the last year, where I felt a little stuck. Like, I think we did a great job of honing all this language and talking about it, but I was kind of confused as to how we were actually moving on some of these goals, because it is hard. We all are folks with jobs in different organizations, with our own battles day to day. Our capacity is limited. But there's a lot of really powerful strengths, like we outlined. There's a lot of things we can do as an alliance. And I think there's a lot of potential and ways we can kind of start to think about collaborating and working a little bit differently towards the end of these goals, but maybe thinking about how we approach them a bit more from an action-oriented space, if that makes sense. How we actually move on them instead of just talking about them or thinking about the language of them specifically. And I think the community spotlights have been a great first step, right? Like we said, there's a lot of power in learning from these kinds of partnerships and knowing what's happening in our community, knowing the resources available. I mean, we see it just here with Mario offering to reach out to some folks to see if he can get some movement on a project that Nate wants to start, right? That's a huge piece of furthering this work, is having these moments of connection. And I think there's a lot of power to that. But I think there's other parts of our goals that aren't as acted upon because they take different kinds of strategy and steps to get there. And so just to review, our stated goals that we worked on together is that by 2030, Chicago Wilderness Alliance will represent the full diversity of the region to, 1, increase access to natural areas as well as green and blue spaces of all types that are welcoming to all. 2, expand nature-based programming across the region, particularly in places with the least area of healthy green space as of 2020. And 3, directly address the region's legacy of environmental injustice. These efforts will expand who reaps nature's benefits, with an emphasis on those who have been historically excluded, and deepen people's engagement with nature across the region. Beautiful goals. You can go to the next slide, Laura.
So
go ahead, Bob.
I wonder, if you can go back to the goals.
Yeah.
I think that these efforts is really 1, 2, and 3. So I would just put that below all 3 goals.
Oh, as a separate call out?
As a separate, just not a number, but a separate paragraph, because it doesn't just relate to number 3, it relates to 1, 2, and 3, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Here, I'll make a note of that and we can update it, how we have it stylized on the website too. Cool. With those goals, we have the strategies we identified together. I've got 2 slides of these and I'm just going to kind of read through them. But again, feel free to interject or share thoughts as we go through them. So one of those is to seek the voices and perspectives of historically underrepresented communities, specifically growing strategic community partnerships with BIPOC-led organizations to understand barriers to accessing nature and work collaboratively to enact change, support their growth and capacity. And I think, again, this is where having these community spotlights has been part of that work, right? We're learning from people who aren't necessarily active in the Alliance, seeing some best practices that are happening on the ground. I know there have been some connections made from these community spotlights and folks following up and working together afterwards. So I think there's definitely some traction on that, which is really exciting to see. Increase public awareness of locations, assets, and benefits of green spaces and nature across the 4-state region. Provide multilingual information about green space and natural areas. Increase outreach and social media to a wider variety of people and institutions about green space and their benefits. And with these, go ahead. Expand nature-based programming in places with the least area of healthy green space, which is one of the goals as well. Decrease costs and fees associated with accessing natural areas, transportation, parking, site fees. This was one goal where our strategy that I know a lot of us got stuck on because it has specific percentages, and my brain is still trying to figure out where the percentages came from, but increase mobility and access to green space by creating 20% more bike lanes connected to green space, increasing the length of greenways and blueways by 10%, and increasing the number of blue and green spaces, and contributing to annual increases in blue and green space in the majority of jurisdictions in the region, incorporating as much as possible community-defined green and blue spaces. That was a lot of me reading at you. But I think partially in that kind of overwhelming feeling is a little bit how I feel as and Radhika and I have talked about this and kind of how we want to lead this group going forward, is that this is kind of an overwhelmingly daunting goal we've set up for ourselves. And I think part of the issue is that, I mean, personally, and again, I'm super open to people's opinions. You are welcome to disagree with me on this. If you go to the next slide, Laura, I don't know that we set up our goal in the SMARTY format. And so if you're not familiar with the SMARTY acronym, I think most of us are. It's something that's strategic, measurable, ambitious, which we have, realistic, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. And I think where I get stuck a little bit is the strategies, to me, kind of read more like our sub-goals, right? They're goals, which are good, but they're not really a strategy to achieving those goals, so to speak. And not everything that we've listed is particularly measurable. I think we can definitely look back at the number of organizations we featured in our community spotlight. We can follow up with folks about collaborations they've had. There's some measurements we can take there. There's some really cool qualitative work we could do to kind of hear from people how this has impacted their work. And I think that's incredibly valuable. And like Nate said too, we've had the opportunity to be able to support the organizations that have taken the time out of their day to share their stories with us. And I think that obviously has an impact, right? And we can follow up on that. But we have to think too about, we're saying by 2030, we want to accomplish all of these things, which is incredible. But I don't know that we have a strong strategy or a realistic kind of sense about how we actually navigate that. Again, as an alliance of organizations that are all doing their own work and have limited capacity. I think we can increase that capacity, obviously, by collaborating on these pieces and working together. But I also think it's good for us to think a little creatively about how we view these goals going forward. So the next slide, Laura. It's a question I offer up to everybody after a year after creating these things, in our wide-eyed, starry-eyed, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed energy that we had. How do we feel about these goals and strategies? Am I being overly critical? Feel free, again, to disagree with me or to bring up a different point. But I'd love to know where people are at on this as members of this group.
I like the goals. I agree with you that the strategies are maybe more like sub goals, and yeah, maybe thinking who else we need to bring in. If we're talking about transportation, do we need to engage some of the public agencies that provide transportation? That may be an aspect. Anyway, just.
Absolutely. Good point, Bill. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, hello, good morning, everyone. One thing that I feel like is maybe missing a little bit is, and what we've been talking about is the physical barriers. And I feel like, because one of the main roles of Chicago Wilderness is really as a coalition, bringing people together. And you talked before about how it takes time and energy to create, I like the word you use, friendships as partnerships, because that's really what it takes. I feel like recognizing that role as, because it is how you achieve some of these, how you achieve greater physical access and things is through the partnerships. So, and that's kind of like the first step. So maybe there's a tactic in there that's Chicago Wilderness can take on around helping people form those partnerships, because that's one of the constraints for us with forming partnerships, because we have such a large geography, is the time and the staff time to create that close partnership. But CW could probably provide some efficiency in that by hosting convenings. And I used to work in the private sector, and I used to participate in these things where you would connect with subcontractors in this very kind of intense networking thing. But it was really helpful because you would meet contractors that you would never be able to connect with otherwise. So that type of thing. And then also, I think CW is often focused on the physical access, but I think what we heard in James's work and others is that there's also the non-physical barriers that should be part of these goals as well. That might be social or cultural or capacity based, that aren't just about having transportation to the site, but it's also the other types of barriers that might exist. So I feel like that's maybe missing from the strategies as well, recognizing that and understanding it.
Absolutely.
From my point of view, and this is a really good thing to clarify, from my point of view, it is not limited to physical accessibility. It is, psychological and cultural and societal and systemic. So if that does not come through clearly, I think we definitely need to work on that language.
Yeah, great point, Radhika. And Adam, I like something you mentioned. I like the idea too of how can we create these spaces for partnerships? How can we help facilitate these connections? Something that Radhika and I have been talking about that we'd love to get more people's feedback on too, and thinking about how we move forward in 2023 is like, is this structure what we want to keep doing, having quarterly Zoom meetings, or would we prefer to meet more often virtually, or maybe less often and in person? Like, how can we help, where do people feel would be, what do people feel would be helpful, and how can we as co-chairs facilitate these kinds of things that you want to see as part of this group that you think would be helpful? All of this feedback is very beneficial to us, and I would love to have the opportunity to have some in-person networking, again, maybe different sites around the region so that we can get people out to spaces they haven't been to. Maybe we have an outing to Surrett one day and get folks out to Nate and, see what's happening in our region in areas we don't get to go to very often. And maybe it's, it's a bit of an ask, but I think the reward of that would be pretty substantial, of getting to see each other in person and build some of these connections a bit more strongly, for sure.
Can I think that's the intention. We're hoping to build around the field trips that we're planning in 2023. And I totally agree. It would be great to move around the region. Adam, I wanted to ask a question. Can you flesh out, when you talked about the convening that you did, what was that like? How was that structured, and what did you do?
So I used to be a planning consultant in the private sector, and sometimes when you worked with a particular agency, if there were, they had requirements about connecting with emerging kind of companies that didn't have this kind of professional connections. And so they would host an event where it was kind of like speed dating, where you would meet the different partners and have 10 minutes to talk to them about what their goals were, what their background is. And it was super helpful because you're able to build a team of people then really quickly. Whereas it would have taken, hours and hours and hours of meetings and scheduling meetings to do that outside of that type of intense event. So it's kind of an interesting model.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing too, Laura had to hop off, I think, Laura Jerks, but she put in the chat that it could be worthwhile to meet again in January to have small group discussions about the strategies, whether they're attainable and appropriate. And I'm curious if other folks be interested in that. I think it could be good to revisit. And like Radhika said, if there's some elements of the language that are not conveying our intentions, maybe we can think about refining some of that then as well.
Nan, did you have something to contribute?
Yes, let me start there.
Go ahead.
Start my video. The challenge in all this is that as a coalition, we each are doing our own work day to day. And the thing that I have found so helpful in these strategies is that it helps me as we do the work of my agency to be able to keep it in mind so that we can place it where it's best placed and can do the things that we can best do. And for me, that's the most helpful piece of all of this. I think as the broad coalition, it's hard to make it measurable in a way that's easy, because everybody's doing different things, and the agencies and the organizations within Chicago Wilderness have very different goals and strategies. And there's a lot of overlap. There's a huge overlap in that Venn diagram, but there's areas that I have no impact on that somebody else can have a tremendous impact on if these strategies are top of mind as they do their daily work. So that's where I find it most helpful.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, Nan. In the interest of time, just seeing we've got about 13 minutes left, I'm going to shift a little bit to talk about the work that the Jedi Roadmap is doing, because I think for Radhika and I, at least, it makes sense for us to kind of integrate with that group, because the focus of the roadmap is increasing our equity and inclusion efforts. And again, I'm curious in people's feedback from this, but to me, that just kind of means, having this group's input on different aspects of that process, helping to carry out some of these components for those who have capacity to be involved in those pieces, and just kind of giving general updates throughout as part of this group, and kind of housing some of that work within our goals and strategies as well, because it is incredibly aligned with what we have outlined. The main three focuses of the roadmap are increasing our engagement, access, and advocacy, which are all three words that have come up during today's conversation. So I think that there's a lot of energy around that we can kind of shift together, instead of having these disparate, efforts that are doing the same thing but working in different rooms, which isn't very helpful. And the whole point of the roadmap is to integrate into all of the initiatives, not just goal 5, but we're kind of starting here because there's so much alignment, and hopefully I'll be meeting with leads from the other initiatives as well to see how we integrate the work throughout all of our initiatives. But I just kind of want to give a quick call out. So the first project that's happening right now through the roadmap process, we've gone through kind of these sessions, the Cream City Conservation that many of us were on. There was a group of us who looked at CW kind of holistically and said, okay, what do we need to work on, and what can we do within like the first year or so? And so our first focus is really to kind of do a bit of asset mapping, and to take stock of what's happening within our alliance, because that's still a big question for me in determining what we can do as an alliance that we can't do as individuals, which I saw mentioned in the chat, is what is everyone doing? We can't all be on top of everyone's initiatives and projects all the time. And so for me, I think the first step is to just get a sense of what are people doing? What do people want to be doing that they don't have the ability to do? And where are the gaps, and how can we kind of help to build those bridges and connections to help overcome some of those barriers people are facing in trying to increase their justice, equity, diversity, inclusion work. And so the audit is a survey we're asking every partner organization to take. Every organization needs to only fill it out once. So we don't want multiple staff taking it multiple times within an organization. But it might make sense for multiple staff within an organization to come together to fill it out as a group. For Brushwood Center, we just had a staff meeting this week that I led our team through, and we filled it out together. Those who had better answers for certain questions jumped in. But it's meant to be kind of a really holistic overview, looking at both the structural side of your organization or institution, and then the programmatic side. So internally, what are the JEDI or equity, diversity, inclusion processes that your organization is undertaking? Or if not, what are the barriers you're facing to undertaking those? And then on the programmatic side, what resources do you have? What kind of inclusive programs or practices are you providing? And how can we help kind of share some of these best practices with folks who may be newer in the work, and kind of help those leaders? How can we call out the work of those leaders and uplift it so that it is a resource, to Nan's earlier point, that people can look to when they're trying to do this work in their own organization? Next slide, Laura. I think I kind of spoke to all of this already, but again, just, the goal is to do this kind of internal inventory, a bit of asset mapping, but also looking at the deficits too. And it's not meant to be a report card or a pat on the back for anyone. It's really just kind of supposed to be a way for us to look at what's happening within our alliance, within our region, and what are the gaps that we can identify. And it's also supposed to be helpful for organizations too. I think for speaking for my organization, we did that this week, this audit, and we're doing our 2023 strategic planning next week. So it's kind of helping us identify a lot of the spaces we want to grow in, and it's going to be a really big part of framing that conversation. So I'd hope that your organizations find this helpful as well in identifying your next steps and how you want to grow in your different practices. And as folks are taking this, if you have any questions or if you come across anything you don't quite understand, I am happy to work with organizations as they work through it as well. My time and capacity is limited, but if it works out, I'm happy to help talk your group through it, or at least meet with somebody and kind of give a bit more in-depth overview of any of the questions. Next slide. And so, like I said, there's 3 main goal areas that we've identified as part of the roadmap process that we want CW to be really honing in on. And again, you can see the obvious connections with our own goals in the Initiative 5 group. So engagement, accessibility, and advocacy, and the audit relates to all 3. So engagement, it's helping us assess who is engaging with this work in a meaningful way and who needs to be connected. How can we help build those relationships? Accessibility, it's helping us identify what places and organizations have accessibility and accommodation features within our region. How can we create, add to the hub to, how can we add these resources to the CW hub in a way that's meaningful and helpful for folks who are looking for resources and looking to advance this work? And then advocacy based on our findings, again, talking to what we were talking about earlier with kind of how can we help push forward policy or make recommendations? What are the things that are needed that we can help support and uplift as an alliance? What are policy recommendations, or maybe not policy, but general statements we can make about needs we're identifying? If we have folks who are working more heavily, like in the transportation sector, like Bill brought up, if we have folks more in the healthcare sector, like Laura mentioned, what are some recommendations we can make as this coalition of nature practitioners? That could be a really powerful statement that could help influence the movement. And how do we better advocate for and amplify the leaders in this work? I think the community spotlights are a great example, doing the cafes, but how can we go beyond that too? What are other things that need to have a light shed on them that people should know about? Next slide. And so moving forward with this, if you're interested in engaging with this work more, we can use help from folks in moving this forward. So I'm looking for folks to help advertise this more or less, kind of to understand, to be kind of at my level of understanding of the audit, and help folks, help encourage folks to take it, be there to answer questions alongside me if people need help as they navigate taking this survey. We're also going to need people to help with the data and analytics, helping review responses and pull out themes and making connections. This could all be done virtually as well. And, it doesn't have to be, we're pretty open to having people connect with this at the capacity they're at. You don't have to commit to this as like multiple hours per week, but just even having people's like initial input and feedback on different aspects of this process is super helpful. And then in terms of advocacy, if there's folks who would be interested in kind of acting as policy guides alongside Raquel, to help create some kind of guidelines and framework based on these responses that help us navigate, our next steps, that would be super great. So, Radhika, feel free to chime in too about your thoughts on the integration of this, but I think there's a lot of folks in this group who have really fantastic knowledge and are doing great work in these areas, and your feedback and input on this process can kind of make or break, so to speak, where CW goes with this, how we put these values that we've stated into action, and how we actually create some meaningful and sustainable movement around Jedi work in our region. Yeah, Becky.
Yeah, and I apologize. I feel like I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around these different things, right? Because we have the Jedi. So the Jedi roadmap for all of CW, like that's going to be integrated across the whole thing. And then the strategies and goals we were talking about earlier, those are specifically for this goal that we're working on, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry for not having more clarification on that.
No, that's okay. I feel like we've talked about both. And so I just kind of had them together in my head. And so this clarifies a lot.
I think we are looking to have them merge because the work is so integrated.
Right.
We cannot begin to really create welcoming spaces and partnerships if we ourselves as organizations and personnel and individuals are not doing our internal work.
Mhm.
Right, that's really going to impact our internal work is really going to impact how we are interacting with different communities. And so I think it really goes hand in hand, and I think we all need help and resources and sharing on all fronts.
Yeah,
So that's a question that we're answering right now, Becky, is how do we integrate? And maybe we do have like subgroups of this Goal 5 initiative, like those of you who are experts in transportation or health, or or this internal audit. We could have working groups that are all trying to achieve the overall goals.
Absolutely. I just want to call it, Jacqueline asked in the chat, last November, there was the culture and inclusion survey that was part of the Cream City conservation workshops that was sent out. This audit is separate from that. So that assessment was really looking at the internal culture of organizations and was meant to have multiple, as many staff as possible from each group take it to kind of assess personal Jedi practices and how they relate to the feelings of staff. Like, do you feel heard in your organization? Do you feel like comfortable bringing about change or asking for certain things? Whereas this is more kind of looking at like, does your board have to sign on to a stated value, to a statement of values? Do you have policies or procedures relating to Jedi work? How much money are you investing in this? On the program facing side, do you have programs in multiple languages? Do you have accessible spaces? So it's really more kind of about the internal structure and then the public facing side of things, more so than individual experiences, if that makes sense. Awesome. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, your point on looking for people on data and analytics team, just want to highlight a program we have. Actually, it's a cross between Northwestern, I think Chicago State, Northeastern Illinois, U of I, called the Metropolitan Chicago Data Science Corps. And it's really engaging students in a variety of data science classes working. And so I put a link into our website. It'd be great if we could share that around the group as well. I'd be happy to talk with anyone who has ideas and connect. I'm not a data scientist, but I can help connect with folks. We've collaborated with quite a few different groups. We're sort of getting off the ground. It's funded by NSF, so there's no cost to the partner organization except spending a little bit of time working with the teams that are working with you. So that's one. The other comment I have is, Radhika, I agree that there's a lot of overlap, but I wonder whether maybe some subpart of Goal 5 is different. Maybe the physical aspects of Goal 5 could be carved out as a separate one, and the more sociological and attitude part maybe merge really well with the Jedi. But if you're going to increase the trail, who are you going to work with to build that trail? How are you going to? So there are some parts that might be different or that might move into some of the other goals, but don't lose the physical parts that are different. I think there is a lot of overlap, no question, and I think it doesn't make sense to duplicate things that really are overlapping. And so maybe it's just a reorganization of some of the goals.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. And I think the important thing too with the roadmap is how we're thinking about it is not like we've created our own separate list of initiatives that we want to do on top of our current initiatives. It's really about how do we integrate these values that we've stated as an alliance that we want to be living out into all of the work that's already happening, and how do we just kind of center the work that we're doing within these principles of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think to my mind, the audit, I think, is a really nice way for us to start capturing some kind of measurable data for our group of like what's happening in our region. So we can start building out these, the work around our goals. So we can look at what's happening, and then we can kind of look at our goals and our strategies we identified for our initiative specifically and think about, okay, well, we have this information. How do we move these pieces forward knowing this, So definitely not meant to be like a takeover of our initiative or anything, or to like move out our goals, but really kind of more about like helping us act on them, if that makes sense. Yeah. But with that, I know we are slightly past time. I know that was a lot of information to take in. But I think if everybody's mostly amenable to this, I think meeting in January to kind of strategize a bit on these pieces would be great. Maybe having some subgroups like a couple people have suggested, looking at the different aspects could be really helpful. And hopefully by then I'll have a little bit more initial data from the audit that we could kind of start to think about together, maybe helping to inform some of the re-strategizing that we look into.
That's good.
Awesome. But thank you everyone as
Thanks,
always.
everyone. I think we all have to jump off to our next meeting, but we'll definitely be in touch and open up the opportunity for anyone to help us with that strategy session in January.
Yeah. Awesome. If we don't see you, have happy holidays. Have a great one.
Holidays, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.